Hi, I'm Lindy, and welcome to Intentional Trips. I wanted to do this first little episode just to kind of answer the question of what are we doing here to the best of my ability. Um, and poetically, the question of what are we doing here is more or less the question that has kind of driven my entire life and is the question that I am in service of answering, right? I get maybe that's what we can say is that is what all of this is just the what are we, what am I, what is anyone doing here? But in a smaller sense, in the why are you watching this video, what am I trying to say, what are we doing here, right? This space, this project, this thing that I am creating, I do fundamentally know that it cannot fully be understood until it is just kind of seen. And that comes, that goes for me as well. I have a very real grasp on what it is that I am creating and how I need to create it. And there is so much of it that I will only come to understand as it actually is being put out into the world. But I believe anybody that is undertaking this journey with me, right, that is choosing to kind of listen, watch, read, whatever it is, that it will all start to make sense as it is explored. Um, yeah, but more or less what it is this complete externalization of everything that has lived internally in me for my entire life. It is philosophy, it is spirituality, it is healing, it is, travel, it is psychedelics, it is sexuality, it is being a human being in a world that really doesn't want us to be human beings. It is figuring out who I am, who we are as people, as bodies, as entities on this planet. It's sharing everything that I have seen, done, felt, experienced, and sharing it in a way that I the other day I was journaling on all of this, and it's funny, this is called intentional trips, right? Like having an intention going into anything large has always been really important for me. I like to set an intention before I enter any kind of, ceremonial container, anytime I go on a large trip, travel, anytime I use psychedelics, there's an intention, right? It's like, what are we doing? What are we seeking? It's not a goal. Those are very different things, right? It's just the intention of like, what am I open to? What am I calling in here? And I was journaling the other day and I was like, what is the intention of this? Um, and if I'm completely honest, as I always will be, the first thing that came through was I want to save the world. And that feeling has been in me my entire life, right? This feeling that it's like I I don't know, that like I'm here to help. I'm here to save the world in some sense, and that might sound incredibly grandiose, and it is this deep thing in me. And I'm not saying that I think that's what I'm doing here, right? That I'm like, oh, well, all I need to do is make a podcast and then everything will be fine. That is not that is not what I am saying. What I am simply saying is like that is in my heart, that is the thing that is driving me, has always driven me. It is the simultaneous need and desire to save myself. And in doing so, by sharing my own journey, my own experience, I have found that doing that really helps people. It connects people. It makes people feel not so alone, not so crazy. And I have felt alone and crazy a lot in my life. Um, and so much of this journey that I have been on, this healing journey, this spiritual journey, this literal journey around the world, that I will take you on, because that is part of what all of this is just the like the fun and the travel of all of it. Um, but in all of the healing and everything that I've had to do, one of the biggest pieces of that, one of the first pieces that when I really sat down to be like, we're healing this stuff, one of the first things that I had to look at was my own terror of using my voice, of being heard, of being seen. Um, I used to, I used to violently shake if I was on a Zoom call with more than one other person. If it was me and two other people and I had to say something, it didn't even matter if it was two of my closest friends. I was so afraid of saying anything in a way that felt like a platform, like a, yeah, that I couldn't. Um, in one-on-one conversation, that's always been a little bit easier for me. And I also always held this invisible wall up for myself, being like, yeah, like I can get into the depths of certain things, but there are places that I will not go because I'm afraid of them. And I'm afraid of what happens, if I say or do, or if I am anything that is in any way off putting or unbecoming to somebody, and there was this simultaneous fear of being unlovable that went very much hand in hand with that fear of speaking, of using my voice, where it was like, well, if I say anything that's a little bit, whatever it might be, that in some way that would, um, yeah, render me unlovable, and that it would push people away. And there's so much wrapped up in all of it. And all of this to say, there are plenty of other things that I've had to heal and face, fears within myself, deep pieces of myself that had been wounded along the way. And in doing all of this, I have come to find that the more that I speak about it, the more that I share the absolute truth of what happened to me, of how it felt, of what I thought, of what I think, of who I am, that helps. And it's funny because for a long time too, it was like I we have a tendency, I believe, as human beings, um, we love looking at other people's things, right? And being like, well, if that was my journey or my path or my, trauma or whatever it was, like that would be easy. Like I want that person's thing. I want like, oh, well, if I had that, like it would be, oh, this would be a breeze, but mine is like the most impossible thing, that anybody has ever done. And like, that's why it's so hard. Because we always, yes, anything external, we would love to just put stuff on rather than looking at our own path and our own karma and our own dharma and our own journey, right? Um, where was I going with this? The speaking. For a really long time, it was like, oh, well, am I supposed to be like a politician? Am I supposed to be, Greta Thunberg, who's an incredible human being and literally saving the world in her own way? But I was like, well, does that mean that we have these ideas of what it means to help, to be of service, yeah, to fix, to do? And the truth is, right, the truest truth, and you will hear me say this all the time, because the only thing that matters in this life is the truth, the actual truth of your heart, the truth of your soul, the truth of whatever it is. That is, the truth will set you free. It's not just an expression, it is, right? But the truth is that the only real way that we can help anyone or anything on this planet is by doing what is true and real for us, walking our own path, healing our own stuff so that we can then be of service and be that light for other people. But, someone like Greta, if she secretly wanted to be, I don't know, a baker, but somehow she's fallen into this path where she's this political activist and, doing all the stuff that she's doing, it wouldn't actually be of true service, because there would be that thing in her being like, but this isn't it. And the way that she's And that's not to do a discredit to the work that she is doing. And I do believe that this is her calling. I actually don't know her at all. So who knows? She's just the example that came to mind in this. um, I guess the point being, like for me, if I were to go into some other lineage, right? For a long time, I was like, am I supposed to be like a therapist or like a breathwork facilitator? And it was just, and then a lot of me too was like, it would just be easier actually if I could just be like, and I don't want to belittle any profession. It's never just a therapist, right? There's so much more than that, and the whole lived human experience, and all of these things. But part of me was always just like, if there was a path that I could follow, right? Like if I was to be a yoga instructor, at least I know that I can get certified and then I can do the classes, and that path is laid out. And for me and my soul in this lifetime, the path had to be paved by me entirely, every single pebble along the way. And with the help of literally thousands of people who have loved me and helped me and guided me along that path. But I had to figure everything out in my own way, right? And while sometimes handling that with grace, and very often, as if you go on this journey with me and hear the story and hear me share everything, you will see that often that often was very much coupled with the opposite of grace, actually, just a lot of kind of screaming at the sky, being like, this is really hard. And I'm uncomfortable and I'm tired of figuring this out. um it's very sweet, the I now kind of come to I have now come to understand my body, my soul, my mind, how these things all, come together to create the being that I am, right? And I love my mind. I love all three of these components, right? But my mind, which I synonymously will sometimes refer to as like my human, it's kind of like the ego, the brain part, where sometimes my soul is up there being like, okay, so you've got to do this, and like you trust this and everything's fine and it's all, for this higher good, and like you're good, everything's going to be fine. But my human will be down on earth being like, yeah, but this is really hard and I don't want to do this. And my soul's like, okay, yeah, you can be as grouchy about it as you want, like it doesn't change what's going on. And then there are days that my human absolutely loves the work and it's all play and it's all fun, and it's just like, that's part of the human experience, right? We are multifaceted beings. And learning to hold all of that, learning to love all of that within myself is also part of this journey. Yeah. So, how this will all look, right? In this space where I am speaking, the podcast, the YouTube component of it, this will be broken down into three main components, two large components and one that I currently believe will be smaller, but it might hold just as much space as the others. We will see as time goes. Um, the first will be what is titled the integration, which this episode more or less is, where it is the talking about how the experiences that I have had, the things that I have come to understand, the places that I have been, both literally and metaphorically, right? Because I have been all over this planet. My entire life has been spent traveling, and I have lived in more places I don't even, know how to count anymore, because sometimes I have an entire life in a week too, right? Had a lot of entire lives in weeks of this human experience of mine. Um, but we have these experiences, yes, like in travel, in psychedelic ceremony that I have had plenty of, that, in healing, in meeting people, in just having these experiences that change us in some way, that have changed me in some way. And it took me a really long time to realize that I guess not everyone is as profoundly moved and changed by like everything that happens to them as I am. I thought that this, there's no such thing as normal, of course, but I thought that my experience was normal. And I have come to realize that there are those of us that are deeply, deeply impacted and affected and moved by everything. And there are other people that just are kind of along for the ride, and that's beautiful, right? Um, but it took me I was like, how can you, like, how could somebody go and experience life in another country for a month and then come home and just kind of be like, okay, yeah, that was a thing, and then just go on with their lives, right? Because for me, it's like I would have these experiences. And, the word integration is not a word that I really had in my vernacular until the last few years. It might have been helpful 20 years ago, but I didn't, I knew it existed, but I hadn't thought about it, right? But for me, it started when I was very, very young, and my family moved from abroad back to the United States, and 6-year-old me could not really reconcile the differences. Uh, but in my, more kind of developed consciousness, the first time that I really recognized a disconnect was when I was 15. I spent a month on a summer program in San Sebastian, Spain. And at the time, I didn't have a cell phone abroad. I had an email address, but I basically emailed my family like once a week to be like, I'm alive. Other than that, I was completely cut off from my home world. And I spent that month with some beautiful people, just getting lost on these ancient Spanish streets and meeting new people and, skinny dipping at 2 o'clock in the morning. And none of us, we weren't doing anything we weren't supposed to be. None of us were drinking. None of us were partying. We were just living and being. And I was letting myself get lost on these foreign streets. And I was trusting my own heart to guide me and just smelling things I'd never smelled and feeling things I'd never felt. And it was my first real taste in this life of what I now recognize as kind of that like higher state of consciousness. Travel is one of my gateways and always has been for those ascended states that I now have access to all the time. But for a long time had to find only through travel, through psychedelics, through meditation, through breath work, through those things, right? Some people find those states, that connection through art, through music, through creation, through sports, like athletes. When you're in the zone, it's like everybody has a different thing that connects them. And for me, it was being lost in a foreign country with no one to know where I was, who I was, what I was doing. All of this to say, I got back from that month where I had just tasted heaven, where I had become this being that I didn't know I could be, right? And then all of a sudden I get back to the suburbs and I am profoundly changed, but everybody that I'm interacting with sees the same being that they saw that left 4 weeks before. They haven't changed at all. And I'm like, how could I just have literally tasted heaven and you expect me to go to high school? What? You want me to talk about like the mall? Like I can't do that, right? But I had to learn how to do that. And it became this cycle, right? Of me then, when I was 15 years old, I was working 3 jobs. I literally worked 6 days a week, plus was in school full time, to save up money so that on the next summer I could do another trip like that. And that became a cycle for me. It's just kind of like working my butt off, saving money, going somewhere, doing this all over the world. And yes, the point being that the integration of those experiences, and then psychedelic journeys as well. Once I got into my later 20s, I started exploring psychedelics more. And again, there are some people that can take mushrooms and just like go to a party and have a good time and hang out. And that is great. I've never, that ain't me. Like cannabis, like opens my third eye. I was 17 at a party smoking weed with people, and they're just kind of like hanging out talking. And I'm sitting there being like, I didn't have words for it at the time, but I like I'm connected to these like different realities, planes of consciousness, and I'm like freaking out because I'm like, this is why. How can everyone else just like you're just like eating pizza and talking about a movie? Like I can't. Right? What? Um. Yeah, but that's me, right? That's just me. Um. But as I started having these deeper psychedelic experiences, again, it was this thing where it was like I was opening myself up to all of these new realities, these new planes of consciousness, these new states of being. And then the next day, it was like, how am I supposed to just like go to work? Like, how do you integrate all of this? And finally, for almost 5 years ago, where the story part of this entire podcast will start. I basically committed to the fact that I had to I had to figure out everything that I hadn't figured out yet, and eventually I needed to integrate all of it. I actually spent about a year or two opening more boxes before I was willing to actually integrate all of them, which was my journey. I don't know if I recommend it. Oh man, it was pretty intense, as you will see as we get there. But there was just this thing in me that always wanted to know more, right? And for a while, I was like, well, maybe if I know more, I won't have to integrate the things that I have learned, because integration is actually really, really, really hard and really uncomfortable. Because it's nice to live, again, anybody that's experienced a trip that has changed them, be that a vacation or traveling or a psychedelic journey. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where it's like you're in this heightened state of being, but then you have to come back to reality. And we as humans really would rather, most of us, it's like, well, if I could just get back there, then everything will be good. And that's why a lot of people continue using a lot of drugs. It's why a lot of people, will seek out different highs in different ways, be that sex, be that travel, be that, drugs, be that whatever their thing is, because they're just like, well, if I just get here, then everything's fine. And then they fall down again. And they're like, well, now I'm kind of back in this like, ugh. And instead of sitting down here and being like, okay, well, how do I bring this experience here and kind of like fuse these worlds? Most people, myself included, for a long time, it's like, well, I don't want to do that work. I would rather just go back up and pretend I'm never going to come back down again. Integration is what bridges all of these worlds together. It's what has gotten me to the spot where it's like, okay, yes, I have experienced things in this life, on this planet, through my travels, through my life, that are absolute heaven, the most heightened experiences, the most incredible, loving, wonderful things that a human being could imagine. In my psychedelic journeys, I have experienced planes of reality and consciousness and altered, literally lived entire other lives of other human beings, be those my own parallel lives or someone else. It doesn't really matter, right? But it's like I have become one with the universe, with God, whatever you want to call it. And now I can also just be a human being who has all of these experiences that live within me, who is all of these things, who is all of these pieces of myself that I have, come to learn and love and understand along the way, but that I can just be. And I don't have to be in heaven at all times. I don't have to be in hell at all times. It's just like, no, like we're here. Yeah. So the integration is the talking about the experiences and the fusing of them into reality. That will be a lot of spirituality. That will be a lot of healing journey, a lot of inner child stuff. Just kind of the big esoteric questions in life, I guess. um and if you have any questions or thoughts or things you want to share along the way, please email me, send them to me, comment me, whatever it is. I'm intentionaltrips@gmail.com. um, The second part will be titled The Trip, which is where I'm just telling the story, right? For the most part. Of course, there will be overlap and bleed through in all of these parts because that is just life. But that component will more or less be just me kind of being like, this is what happened. This is where I was. This is who I met. This is the incredible serendipity and magic that just like, because one of the many things to take away from all of this is just the way that the stars align always. Always. Especially when it's just that complete trust and that, like, all I'm doing is listening to my intuition, listening to my heart, no logic, no reason. I can't explain it, but I just know that I need to go and do this thing. And the people that appear, the lights that align, just the way that it all works out. In the trip component, I will also be talking about the psychedelic journeys that I've gone on. And the things seen and experienced and explored there, but that's all part of the linear journey as well, because those experiences happen according to a human man-made calendar, like that's how they happened. um one of the things that this journey of mine has brought me on, though, that I didn't expect, and to be clear, I have planned nothing in my entire, I don't have the bandwidth to plan, to control, to anything. I listen to the inner voice that speaks to me. I have gotten better at that over the years. There was a lot of resistance to it when I was younger, and now I'm just like, whatever you say, I'm not in charge here. Because the more, if I ever try to steer the ship, I'm at the helm, but I'm not the one in control, right? And anytime I try to control anything, that's when stuff starts going haywire, and I don't have an interest in doing that anymore. But I did for a really long time. Anyway, what I realized as I was going on this journey over the last few years, part of it was that I found myself, for my entire life, I had always gone to new places on earth, right? There were a few places I would go back to, but for the most part, every time I traveled, I would go somewhere new, somewhere new, somewhere new. And after my first ayahuasca experiences, I realized that everywhere I had started going, I was going back to places that had been incredibly significant to me at other points in my life. Everywhere I was going was a return. And it took me a while to realize this, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. And then all of a sudden it was just so obvious, where it was like this current version of me, the version of me that was now on the healing journey, that was committed to finding myself. I was going back everywhere on earth I had ever been, and especially the places that I had been at some of my lowest points that I had needed saving the most. And this current version of me was showing up there and basically being the light that had pulled me through in the past. Because my whole life, at my darkest moments, I have had some dark moments. That's something else. I'm not really a trigger warning kind of person, but I guess this is the trigger warning for the entire thing. I'm not going to shy away from anything. Um, I need to share every part of myself completely and openly and truly. And yeah, so the darkness is part of that. The darkness of me is a beautiful part of me, and it is crucially important to the whole story and the whole understanding. But all of that to say, at my darkest moments, when I, as a child, when I didn't want to be in this life anymore, when I was actively making plans to leave, the little voice in my head, the thing that kept me going, it was never anything else that any of my therapists said. I had half a dozen therapists as a child. It was nothing that my parents said. It was nothing that anyone else said that ever felt true or real or right. It was this thing in me that just said, hold on, and it gets better and it's worth it. I now recognize that voice as my own. This version of me, right? The version of me who has been doing this work for the last few years. And so on this journey, part of the trip, going back to all of these places and actively sending that energy back through time and space, picking up those previous versions of myself and being like, you're safe now, I've got you. And realizing, because as we get into the consciousness and spirituality and all of that too, right? It's like time isn't real. Everything that's ever happened is happening right now. The version of me that existed at birth and the version of me that will pass later in this life, simultaneously happening in this exact moment. I have found that it is easier for me to access different versions of my own timeline, being back in the places where those versions existed. And so as I'm telling the story of the trip, right? Or the trips, there will also kind of be this framework story of the versions of me that existed in these places before, right? Like when I ended up back in Bali, where it's like, okay, cool. So I was in Bali in April of 2023, but I was also in Bali in January of 2019. And how was January of 2019 feeding and fueling April 2023? And what were those timelines? And how was that all being healed together and integrated in the integration? The third component, which, like I said, I believe will currently be small than the other two, but we will see. Who knows? Um, is the present, is just what's happening now. Um, what's coming up for me now. And the only reason that I currently believe this will be smaller than the others is because what's happening now is also, it will likely inevitably be shared and, kind of revealed, I guess, in those other components. But it feels important to have a space where I can kind of just come in and interject something that doesn't necessarily follow the trajectory of the others. um, yeah, so that's what that third one will be. And alongside of all of the story and the speaking and the, that component, um, I will be sharing my writing. I am a writer, a poet, a scribe, if you want to call it. Um, so some of it is written story of these experiences, these things that happened, and then some of it is just the feeling. I have processed a lot of the emotion of some of these bigger things through my writing, and so my writing can be kind of heavy sometimes. I love it, but I've had multiple people be like, I know you, and then I see what you write, and it just doesn't. I'm like, oh, surprise, she's full of darkness. um, yeah, but that will be being shared on Instagram, and on Substack. And there will be links to those places in the notes of this episode and all of the notes of forever. Um, and the biggest thing, I guess, for all of this is Patreon. I am completely trusting everything that I am undertaking right now to support me, to guide me, to be my whole universe. I know that this is what I need to do, right? Um, and I'm asking for people that believe in it, people that get something from this, people that have the means to help support me on Patreon for about $3 a month. That's my lowest tier. There are a few above that. At my next higher tiers, I will be publishing all of my journals from the last few years. So anybody who's interested can basically go back, as I'm sharing a story, just say, in the trip, right, where I'm talking about May 2023, whatever that was. Those journal entries will be being shared on Patreon so that you can hear present me talking about that, but also reading the version of me that existed then, because the version of me that is sharing all of this is the version of me that is embodied, that has healed almost all of these things, right? That is capable of doing this. I think that it's crucially important for anybody that wants to be able to access it to understand and to realize and to see what the internal journey was actually like, because it has been a lot. It's been hard, it's been beautiful. A lot of the entries are beautiful and happy and full of promise and, magic and all of those things. But then there's also a lot where, and it's, a lot of it's very repetitive. It's stuff that I've been processing and dealing with for a really, really long time. But it feels vitally important to share that, because I think a lot of the time we really just see somebody who has arrived. And I have not arrived, right? But like, I know that I am the version of me that I have been moving towards my entire life. And that is not nothing. And all of the versions of me that came before this are versions that were really struggling to figure it out, who were scared, who were mad, who were feeling all of these things and just had to blindly trust that this was going to work out. And so once more, I am blindly trusting that this is going to work out, but I know that this works out. And I'm asking anybody who can, who's interested, to help support that on Patreon, which will also be the best place to kind of access a bit of everything. I will be sharing the journals there, but then I'll also have, more of the writing and more of the videos, and everything will just kind of be there. That'll be the one-stop shop. But that, like I said, about $3 a month is the lowest tier, and they go up from there. Thank you for listening, for being part of this, and for the work that you're doing on yourself. If you have watched or listened to this whole thing, it's, yeah, whatever it is that's in you that's still here is committed to something, to understanding something. That's maybe also worth saying that, like, this stuff is, it's deep, it's nitty, it's gritty. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's magic. Yes, it's play. Like, especially the trip part of it, right? It's like it's fun. And this life has to be fun. It has to be playful. It has to be joyful. And like I I don't shy away from anything and I get into it, right? And I know for me this is all normal. And I have come to find that it takes people sometimes a while to kind of process everything. So take your time with it, but also know that if you are signing up to go on this journey, that it's like it's gonna be like that. It's gonna be everything, and yeah, and I love that, and I love that I can finally be that in myself because that was a big part of this too, right? I had to shed every single part of myself and then pick up every single piece to see what was real and what was true. And for a long time, I didn't know if it could all fit in one being because there is so much to who I am. And I love that. But it was a doozy of a process figuring out how to be the spiritual one, but also the playful one and the inner child and the, sexual entity and the deep thinker, but also just like I can go to brunch and hang out. That one I'm still kind of working on, but I'm getting there. Yeah, and just to be like, okay, well, you're just like a normal person, but you're also this, massive soul. Yeah, it's a lot to piece back together. And it's been, yeah, the gift of a lifetime to be able to do it. So, anyway, that's what you're signing up for if you're coming along on this journey is every single piece of me and this lived experience. And like I said before, any questions, thoughts, comments that you have, please send them my way. And yeah, I can't wait to see where this all goes. Thank you for being part of it. You're doing great. I love you. Ooh.